Hello, this is Julian with Coffee Reviews, and today we will be reviewing the Esmeralda Geisha Wash Process Panama from Coffee Collective. And there's the bag right there. And Coffee Collective, based out of Copenhagen, Denmark. And this coffee feels a little bit like a match made in heaven for me, as the Esmeralda is my favorite coffee in the entire world. And Coffee Collective is one of my favorite European coffee roasters, definitely my favorite Danish coffee roaster. So seeing them release this coffee is something that definitely caught my interest and was something I very much wanted to review. So I'm looking forward to discussing yet another Panamanian Geisha, as this right here is day 39. And recipe we went with for this coffee was the Coffee Collective's recipe, which is a 15.625 to 1 water to coffee ratio brewed at 95 degrees Celsius. And I like this one best through the V60, which indicates a more medium fine grind. Roast profile for the Coffee Collective, they tend to go even lighter than a lot of the Scandinavian coffee roasters. And this coffee is definitely on the lighter side of things as well. So we can call this one a true Nordic light for the roast profile. With that out of the way, let's go ahead and start discussing this coffee. Day 21, first impression, and the coffee radiated so many of the vintage Panamanian Geisha-like aspects, as it has that special, rare, unique, clean, wonderful base to the cup, which really paves the way for both delicacy as well as a variety of components to it, including this slightly sweet, creamy vanilla aspect, as well as this sweeter citrus, all encompassed in this tea-like body to the cup. So one thing I really want to focus on is that vanilla-like aspect, which is reminiscent of a lot of the Esmeralda coffees I've had earlier this year, which in general has been a little bit more on the vanilla side of things. Something I really like because it is a little unique to them. So I really enjoyed that first impression. We continue on to day 24. So I ran it through the Chemex, and it didn't come out quite as good on this day, as it focused a little bit more on the herbality of the cup itself, with a fair bit of the citric aspects and even more of that sort of vanilla cream-like taste to the cup. The melon note did feel apt, as there's also some delicate florality in the cup as well, but one thing I really wanted to focus on was that citrus, because it was on this day I really noticed when the cup does cool down, especially just about room temperature, it really does open up on the illicit bergamot that they have on here. And this is one of those coffees where it's as pronounced and distinct as possible. So very apt, very perfect tasting note for this coffee. And I have mixed feelings on bergamot, but we will continue on day 27 as we adjusted to the Coffee Collective's recipe, ran it through the Chemex, and it was coming out almost too delicate on this day, as the initial citric forward cup started to cool off into a semi-sweet and herbal vanilla. So it was kind of muddling the vanilla, which I had really enjoyed up to this point. Citric florals continue to be the most pronounced factor, so again, that bergamot very distinct, very prominent, especially with the increase in the overall ratio. So not necessarily my favorite. We continue on to day 30 as we adjusted it to the Coffee Collective's recipe through the V60, and it does feel a little bit more robust on the forefront with a livelier citric aspect to the cup right at the start. It does settle into what's a little bit more of a light and delicate form with the delicate florality to the cup, as well as more of the citric aspects yet again, thinking that bergamot, as I highlighted on here, bergamot in abundance yet again. So a better day. I think I just enjoyed it a little bit more for the amount of robust vibrancy that was coming from the V60. Day 33, best day of the coffee to this point, as it does feel a little bit more in line with the classic Panamanian Geisha, especially Esmeralda, which I like to describe as fruity pebbles. I'll go over that one more time. This kind of sweeter citric grain component to it, which oftentimes is very reminiscent of fruity pebbles, did help that there was that slight vanilla aspect to really kind of push the sweetness over the top. It was a secondary characteristic to the much more prominent citric aspect yet again. There's a slight bit of the listed melon. That's definitely more of a tertiary and at times a fourth aspect within the cup. But the bergamot was a little less pronounced today in place of the more fruity pebble-like experience. So that's why this was my favorite day of this coffee. But I did see overall increases in the enjoyment of this coffee, as on day 36, it was another good day, reminiscent yet again of the classic Esmeralda taste on the forefront. But it does transition into so much more of that bergamot-like aspect. Here on this day, again, I feel like Rest did this coffee some wonderful justice, as I've seen a lot more of those classic, very clean floral components to this cup. On day 36, yet again, delicate florality and citric aspects to the cup, maintaining the entire vanilla-like feel, which I'd experienced throughout the time drinking this coffee, and I feel like it's here yet again on this day. But for the most part, I think I really enjoyed this coffee significantly more on these last 3 days, as Rest really just seemed to help this coffee quite a bit. All right, let's go ahead and put up the tasting wheel so you can see what we were getting. And 3 level 5, so let's go through those real quick. The cleanliness level 5, yes, and typically I reserve cleanliness at a level 5 for Panamanian geishas. The one knock I do have to say about this is, yeah, it's a level 5, but it's a little bit on the lower side of the level 5. It's not as truly clean and clear as I typically expect. That's just me being, I don't know, very picky, very nitpicky about this coffee. Very clean cup of coffee, obviously, to the extent that it did justify that level 5 mark. Florality, level 5, yeah, a bunch of the white flowers, but even then the kind of citric aspect in it was a little bit floral too. So florality and abundance would say it was the secondary most pronounced characteristic to the listed citrus, which it's significantly less prominent and pronounced today. But I'm telling you, on these earlier days, that listed bergamot that they had on here was in just such heavy and wild abundance that, given the cup of coffee is already clean and has such a clean base to begin with, then when you experience that really lively citrus, it really does kind of dominate the cup and becomes one of those things where even if you don't have a lot of experience tasting bergamot or knowing what a bergamot tastes like, then this cup really did a great job of defining that in such strong manner. Let's see what else we must discuss. Finish, level 4. Yeah, it actually does have a little bit more of a finish, I think, than a lot of other ones, especially when I was getting that citric finish to it, that bergamot. That was in huge abundance, and I would say that it was probably one of the more lasting finishes I've had from any sort of Panamanian geisha coffee that was just a standard washed. Sweetness, level 4. Yes, I think it's just right there in line with that level 4, but you can say like 4, lower side of 4.5, but it's still like right there in the middle of that 4 mark. So I think the sweetness in this cup was really nice. I think, yeah, I have no complaints about the sweetness, honestly. I think I might have expected a little bit more in the sweetness. Acidity, level 4, it still is really high on the acidity, and that's kind of to go in line with the fact that they definitely roast quite light with their coffees. So that part I didn't mind, given that it was balanced out quite equally with the sweetness. And then the only other thing I think is really worth discussing is maybe the berry fruits, that enlisted melon, somewhat pronounced from time to time, but never really as clear and distinct as I may have expected or liked. And then, of course, the body, level 1. That one maybe on the higher side of level 1. I'm feeling a little bit more body on this day too, so I don't think it's as quite tea-like as I typically might expect or experience from a lot of Panamanian geisha coffees, but even then, a lot of these things I'm either being generous on or I'm not necessarily, I'm kind of in the middle on them. So like the sweetness I'm thinking, the cleanliness I'm thinking, the body I'm thinking, but I wanted to kind of round them out a little closer to where they actually might be closer to. All right. My overall thoughts and impressions of this coffee. So I went into this coffee with sky-high expectations, and I would say that towards the last 3 days, it started to reach those expectations. I think that it was a really good coffee. I hold Panamanian geisha coffees to a significantly higher standard than I hold any other coffee. So for that reason, I would say that this one was good, not exactly everything I was hoping for, because if I'm being completely honest, I actually enjoyed the Takizi, the Bolivian geisha that they released a couple of years ago, a little bit more than this one. Definitely enjoyed Passenger's Esmeralda this year a little bit more. This one had a lot of great aspects to it, but I think mostly the sticking point was the citric aspect, which was really dominant at times, and the cup felt a little tricky to brew. It only really worked well in one brew method, and the adjustments I made to kind of give it a higher concentration weren't always the direction I like to go with this coffee. So this is me being super nitpicky, but even then, it is a washed Panamanian geisha with a lot of nice aspects to it. So I would still say that it's one of my more enjoyable coffees over this year, but maybe not to the same extent as the other Panamanian geishas. Type of person I would suggest this coffee to, this one actually lends itself to a very clean, clear sort of direction, because if you do enjoy the really clean cups of coffee, obviously this one's a Panamanian geisha, that's what it has going for it. But what really sets this one apart from a lot of the other ones was the very distinct citric aspect to this cup. Some of the other ones have been a little bit more lime, a little bit more lemon, but this one right here had the bergamot in a very clear and pronounced manner. So that's the direction I would definitely push someone towards on this coffee, because that was really nice, and that was complemented well by the additional aspects to it. That kind of sweeter vanilla, the grainy citrus that I was able to get, reminiscent of the Fruity Pebbles, really, really nice when I was able to experience that, all with the classic Panamanian geisha-like characteristics to it. So well-rounded cup of coffee in that sense. For the most part though, I think I'll leave this review at that. If you've by chance had an opportunity to try this coffee, I would love to know your thoughts and impressions of it as well. If you're enjoying the content, give this video a like, subscribe if you're not already subscribed. This right here has been a review of the Esmeralda Geisha, Wash Process Panama from Coffee Collective. Thank you for watching.